"Mom, pack your things and get out of my house. Right now." Those were the exact words my son Richard said to me on Christmas Eve, standing in the doorway of the living room while half a dozen people watched the scene in silence. Vanessa's sister-in-law was slouched on the sofa and turned her face toward the floor, embarrassed. His cousin stood frozen with a drink in his hand, pretending to stare at a blank spot on the wall. The cold winter wind blew through the open window, rattling the curtains. It felt like even the air had stopped circulating in that room, heavy as lead. He crossed his arms and stood there, looking at me as if I were an urgent problem he needed to solve quickly so I wouldn't ruin his evening. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded my head slowly and walked to the guest bedroom to get my suitcase. Passing by the dresser, I saw the photo of Marcus, my late husband, holding Richard when he was just a baby. You know that moment when you realize the person in front of you is no longer the child you raised with so much love? That moment when you understand that you've become a burden, a nuisance, something disposable. I worked for 32 years as a seamstress, straining my eyes to pay for the best private schools for him. I sold the only plot of land I owned in my name when he wanted to start his business. But that Christmas Eve, walking out of that suburban house with an old suitcase in my hand, I didn't know that the very next day he was going to receive the biggest surprise of his life. And that, for the first time, the one who would be left with no ground to stand on wouldn't be me. Stay with me, because this story is just getting started. My name is Martha. I am 62 years old, and I have worked my entire life in sewing and alterations. When Marcus died, Richard was only 12. It was a massive heart attack. He left for work in the morning and never came back. I remember looking at my son during the funeral service and thinking, now it's just you and me against the world. There was no pension, no inheritance. I just had my sewing machine, a rented house, and a bank account with $800 in it. I started sewing for everyone. Alterations, hemming pants, prom dresses, school uniforms, anything I could get. I took work from 3 different dry cleaners and still took private orders through word of mouth. Richard went to school in the morning, and I used those hours to power through the heaviest sewing jobs. When he came back, I would stop, heat up dinner, and help him with his homework. After he went to sleep, I went back to the machine until 1 or 2 in the morning. On weekends, I also ironed shirts for clients. I got paid by the piece to make ends meet. There was one year he wanted to take an advanced computer course. It was expensive. I sold my gold wedding band. I told him I had lost it down the sink drain. I didn't want him to carry the guilt of my sacrifice. When Richard got his acceptance letter to business school, I cried all night. Business administration. A private university. I couldn't afford it. I went to the bank, but the numbers didn't work. I tried to get a loan, but I was denied. Then I remembered the lot. It was a small plot of land Marcus had bought years ago, out in the county, far from the city. We dreamed of building a small cabin there one day, for our retirement. I sold it for $28,000. I paid for all 4 years of his tuition. He hugged me tight when he found out. He promised he would work hard, that he would give me a better life, that I wouldn't need to sew forever. And I believed him. When he graduated, he got a job at a major distribution firm. Then he started a construction supply business with a partner. It worked. The business grew fast. He bought a large house in a nice subdivision. He brought his things, but he left a guest room empty for me. He told me I could stop paying rent and move in with him. I was so happy. I thought finally we were going to live well, together, without financial stress. It was good in the beginning. I helped around the house, cooked meals, organized things. Nothing heavy, just what a mother does with love. Then he met Vanessa. She worked at a high-end boutique downtown. Pretty, hair always blown out, nails perfect, always dressed to impress. In the beginning, she was polite to me. She smiled, said hello, made small talk when necessary. They dated for about 8 months and got married. I helped organize the wedding. I even did the hemming and alterations on her wedding dress for free. She thanked me, but with that slightly distant, cold attitude. When she moved into the house, things started to change subtly. Nothing loud, nothing I could point a finger at and say, look, that's wrong. But I felt it in the air. She reorganized the entire kitchen to her taste. She moved the jars, threw away some dish towels I had brought. She said they looked old and worn out. When I cooked, She ate, but she always had a comment ready. "It's a little salty, isn't it?" Or, "I make this differently." Richard laughed. He thought it was just meaningless banter. I started noticing that she would come home from work and go straight upstairs to her room. She didn't sit down to chat anymore. If I was in the living room, she walked past me as if I were invisible. One day, I was sewing a skirt on the dining room table. She walked in, looked with disapproval and said, "Martha, could you possibly do that in your room? The house gets full of threads and it looks messy." I gathered everything quickly and went to my room. I didn't complain, but I felt something tighten in my chest. Richard didn't see anything. He was working more than ever, coming home late, exhausted. The business had opened a new branch, and he was always putting out fires. I started to feel like I was becoming a piece of furniture, something that was there, taking up space and causing annoyance. Vanessa was never outwardly rude, at least not in front of him. But the way she looked at me changed radically, and little by little, I realized that the way Richard looked at me started to change too. 3 months after the wedding, Vanessa got pregnant. I was overjoyed. It was going to be my first grandson. Richard was beaming, already talking about names, about the nursery decor. When Matthew, we called him Matty, was born, I helped with absolutely everything. I woke up in the middle of the night when he cried, heated bottles, changed diapers, rocked him to sleep. Vanessa went back to work at the boutique when Matty turned 4 months old. It was me who stayed home to take care of him all day. I got up early, gave him his bath, his food, played with him, put him down for naps. When she came home, the baby was clean, fed, and calm. She would take him in her arms, give him a kiss, and go upstairs. She didn't say, "Thank you." She didn't ask how the day went. Richard thought it was natural. "Mom, you have experience. For you, it's easier." I didn't mind taking care of Matty. I loved that boy with all my heart. But I started to realize I wasn't the grandmother. I was the nanny. One day I was in the living room with Matty in my arms. One of Vanessa's friends was visiting. She looked at me and asked, "Is she the nanny?" Vanessa answered before I could open my mouth. "Yeah, she takes care of him pretty well." She didn't correct her. She didn't say, "That's his grandmother." She let the woman believe I was hired help. I pretended I hadn't heard, but I heard it loud and clear. I started paying attention to other details. When they went out for dinner on the weekends, they never invited me. They went alone, or sometimes with friends. I stayed home with Matty. For the boy's first birthday, they threw a huge party. They invited Vanessa's entire family, her friends, the staff from the store. I helped set everything up. I blew up balloons, set the table, cut the appetizers. When it was time for the official photo, everyone gathered around the cake. Richard held Matty. Vanessa stood right next to him. Her parents, her brothers, everyone squeezed in there, smiling. I was off to the side, outside the frame. The photographer didn't even look at me. He snapped the picture and that was it. Later, they posted it on social media. Happy family. I didn't appear in a single image. That night, lying in my bed, I started to think seriously. It wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't me being oversensitive. Something real was happening. I started writing things down in an old notebook I had. Nothing elaborate, just the date and the fact. March 15th, watched Matty all day. Vanessa didn't say thanks, called a friend for dinner and didn't invite me. March 22nd, Matty's party, didn't let me in the family photo. It seemed silly, but I felt I needed to keep a record. 2 months later, I was in my room, and I heard Vanessa rummaging through my things. I went to the door and saw her holding Marcus's sewing box. It was a wooden box he had made for me by hand, with his initials carved on the lid. I kept threads, needles, buttons in there, the tools of my trade. But there was also a photo of our wedding and his old union card. She looked at the box with disdain and said, "Martha, this is taking up too much space here. I'm moving it to the storage unit." I said, "Vanessa, that's a keepsake from my husband. I use it." She sighed, impatient. "Fine, but store it properly then. The house needs to stay organized." The next day, the box wasn't in my room anymore. I went looking for it. I found it in the garage, thrown in a bin with a bunch of old junk, empty cardboard boxes, and broken brooms. I took the box back and hid it in the back of my closet, under my clothes. I wrote it down in the notebook. May 28th, Vanessa threw Marcus's box in the garage like trash. I started noticing that every time I spoke at the dinner table, she cut me off. If I commented on the news, she changed the subject abruptly. If I suggested something for Maddie, she did the opposite in front of him, just to show her authority was worth more. Richard didn't see it, or he pretended not to see it to keep the peace. One afternoon, I was watching TV in the living room. Vanessa arrived with a friend. They sat on the sofa and started talking loudly, laughing as if I wasn't there. I stood up and went to my room. I heard the friend ask, "Does she live here?" Vanessa answered, "Yeah, but we're figuring out a way to resolve that." That sentence cut me like a knife. I went back to my room, locked the door, and wrote everything down in the notebook. I started keeping receipts for everything I paid for, too. The groceries I bought with my Social Security money, the electric bill I chipped in for sometimes, the medicine I bought for Maddie when he got sick. I didn't know yet what I was saving them for, but something inside me said, "Keep it. You're going to need it." And I kept everything. It was in August when Richard came home looking worried. He sat next to me at the kitchen island and confessed the business was going through a rough patch. He needed to pay suppliers urgently, he had a debt past due, and the bank wasn't going to clear the line of credit in time. He looked me in the eye and asked if I could loan him $15,000. I felt a tightness in my chest. $15,000 was almost everything I had saved. I had scraped that together over years, putting away a little bit of my pension every month. But he was my son. It was his business, and he promised he would pay me back in 3 months, with interest. I said yes. The next day, I went to the bank and wired the money to his personal account. I asked for the printed receipt and filed it away. He thanked me quickly, gave me a distracted kiss on the forehead, and rushed out. Vanessa was in the living room, scrolling on her phone. When Richard left, she looked up at me. She didn't say anything, just a little smirk, barely noticeable. A month went by. I didn't bring it up. The second month, I mentioned it at the table, lightly. "Richard, is the situation at the store any better?" He answered distractedly, "Oh yeah, Mom, it's better. Everything's under control." He didn't mention the money. The third month passed. Nothing. I waited 2 more weeks and asked directly, "Son, do you remember those $15,000? You said you'd pay them back in 3 months. He frowned, as if he had forgotten. "Oh, Mom, that's right. I'm still a little tight, but I'll pay you next month. Don't worry." Vanessa was in the kitchen, and I saw she was listening. She didn't turn around. She kept washing dishes, but you could tell by her posture she was hanging on every word. Next month came. Nothing. I asked again. He got irritated. "Mom, I already told you I'm going to pay. Stop hounding me about it." That hurt. It wasn't nagging. It was my money. I started paying closer attention to their spending. They went out for dinner at a steakhouse on Saturday night. They came back carrying bags from designer stores. Vanessa had bought a brand new expensive dress. On Sunday, Richard mentioned he was thinking about trading in his truck for a new model. I didn't say anything, but I went straight to my notebook. September 12th. Richard didn't pay back the $15K. Fancy dinner and new clothes for Vanessa. 2 weeks later, I went to pay a bill at the bank and asked to check my statement. There were 3 withdrawals I hadn't made, 2 for $1,000 and 1 for $800. Different dates, but all within the last month. I felt the ground disappear. I went to the manager and asked how someone could have taken money from my account. He checked the system and said the withdrawals were made with the debit card and the correct PIN. He asked if I had lent the card to anyone. I said no, but then I remembered. Richard had asked for my card once, about 2 months prior, to send an urgent Venmo payment to himself because his account was frozen. He said it was an emergency. I gave it to him. He tapped on his phone and handed it back. But he must have written down my PIN. I went back home and went straight to my room. I looked for the card in my wallet. It was there. It wasn't missing. But someone had used it. I didn't confront him right then. I knew if I spoke up, they would say I was crazy, that I was forgetting things, that I had withdrawn it and didn't remember. I went back to the bank the next day. I asked to change the PIN. I also asked for printed statements for the last 6 months. The teller handed them to me. I took them home, sat on the bed, and went through them line by line. Besides the 3 recent withdrawals, there were 2 more the previous month. $1,500 each. That wasn't me either. $7,800, stolen from my account without my knowledge. I hid the statements in the back of the closet, along with the receipt for the $15,000 transfer. That night at dinner, I looked at Richard. He was looking at his phone, laughing at something. Vanessa was serving food to Maddie. No one looked at me. I thought about all the bills I had paid in that house, about the 7 years of my Social Security checks I had poured into that place, helping with groceries, medicine, electricity, heating. I thought about the land I sold to pay for his college, and I thought about the $15,000 he borrowed promising to return, and the nearly $8,000 he stole behind my back. $23,000, not counting the rest. I finished eating in silence. Then I washed the dishes, dried them, and went to my room. I grabbed the notebook and wrote it all down. Date, amount, the conversation we had. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but something inside me had changed forever. It was Christmas Eve. I had spent the entire day preparing the Christmas dinner. I set the table, decorated with ornaments I had kept from years past, roasted the turkey, made the stuffing, the cranberry sauce, the sides. Vanessa didn't help with anything. She spent the afternoon at the salon getting her hair done. The guests started arriving. Her parents, her brother, her sister-in-law. A cousin of Richard's I hadn't seen in ages. Some of Vanessa's girlfriends. Everyone greeted her warmly. With me, it was just a quick, forced hi. I served the drinks, brought out the appetizers. No one said thank you. I went to the kitchen to check on the food. When I came back to the living room, the conversation was lively. Vanessa's mother was telling a travel story. Everyone was laughing. I sat in a corner. No one noticed. Maddie ran by and I called him. "Come here, sweetie. Give Grandma a kiss." Vanessa jumped up. "Maddie, come here. Let Martha rest." Let Martha rest. Like I was a stranger. Her friend, the same one who had mistaken me for the nanny, looked at me and asked, "Are you eating with us, or do you prefer to eat later in the kitchen?" I didn't understand at first. Then I realized. She thought I was the hired help. Vanessa didn't correct her. She just looked away and changed the subject quickly. I felt my face burn with shame. I stood up and went to my room. I stayed there for 10 minutes, trying to breathe so I wouldn't cry. I heard Richard calling me. "Mom, come on, let's eat." I went back. The table was ready. I had done everything, but there was no place for me. They had set 8 chairs. I counted. 8 people. I was the 9th. Vanessa looked and said, without blinking, "Oh, Martha, I forgot to set a chair for you. Grab one from the kitchen." I went to get the folding chair. I put it at the corner of the table, almost outside. No one moved to make space for me. I sat down. I ate in silence. The conversation continued as if I didn't exist. Jokes, laughter, toasts. When they finished eating, Vanessa's mother stood up and said, "Let's take a family photo." They all stood up enthusiastically. Richard held Maddie. Vanessa glued herself to his side. Her parents, her brother, her sister-in-law, everyone squeezed in there, smiling. I remained seated. No one called me. They took the picture. Then they went to the living room to open presents. I started clearing the dirty plates. Vanessa came back to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of wine, and stood there staring at me while I washed the dishes. She spoke quietly, but with that cutting tone. "You know, Martha, you could help more instead of playing the victim all the time." I stopped washing and looked at her. "Excuse me? You heard me. You stand there acting like a martyr, but you don't do anything right. The food was bland, the table was messy, and you expect everyone to thank you." I took a deep breath. "Vanessa, I spent the entire day cooking this meal for you. Nobody asked you to." Richard walked into the kitchen right then. "What's going on here?" Vanessa turned to him, her voice turning into a fake whine. "Your mother is complaining about everything, Richard. I just asked her to help a little more and she snapped at me." He looked at me with reproach. "Mom, what is this?" I was going to answer, but Vanessa cut me off. "Richard, I can't take it anymore. She's here judging everything I do, taking up space, creating a toxic atmosphere. I want my own house, my own family, and she won't let us live." Richard wiped his face with his hand, tired. "Vanessa, don't exaggerate." "I am not exaggerating." She raised her voice. "Either she goes or I go." Silence. I looked at my son, waiting. He looked at her. Then he looked at me, and then he said, "Mom, pack your things and get out of my house, right now." Vanessa's sister-in-law was standing at the kitchen door. She looked down at the floor. The cousin stood motionless in the living room, staring at the wall. The wind blew the curtain of the open window. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded my head slowly. I went to my room, pulled my old suitcase out of the closet, and started packing my clothes. I grabbed the notebook, my documents, the receipts. I put it all together. I walked through the living room. No one dared to look me in the face. I opened the door and walked out. It was Christmas Eve, 10 o'clock at night, and I was on the street with a suitcase in my hand, with nowhere to go. I went to Mrs. Higgins' boarding house 2 blocks away. She had known me for years. When I knocked, she opened the door in her nightgown, looking sleepy. She looked at me, looked at the suitcase, and didn't ask a single thing. She just stepped aside to let me in. "I have a spare room on the 2nd floor. Stay as long as you need." I walked up the stairs slowly. The room was small, a twin bed, an old wardrobe, a window facing the street. I put the suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. Everything went quiet. I could hear fireworks popping in the distance. Someone was celebrating Christmas. I looked at the ceiling and let the weight of reality crush me. I didn't cry. Not a tear came out, but something inside me broke in a way I had never felt before. It wasn't just the eviction. It was the way he looked at me, like I didn't matter, like I was a problem he had finally solved. I raised that boy alone. I woke up at dawn when he had a fever. I sewed until my hands cramped to pay for his school. I sold the land that was my dream so he could become someone. And he kicked me out on Christmas Eve because his wife ordered him to. I sat there, I don't know how long. Midnight must have struck. I heard the Christmas noises outside. I got up, opened the suitcase, and took out the notebook. I sat on the bed again and started reading, page by page. Every time she humiliated me. Every time he pretended not to see. Every note I had meticulously taken over the last few months. I took out the receipts, the transfer for the $15,000, the bank statement with the withdrawals I hadn't made. I took a sheet of paper and started writing and adding up. $15,000 loaned, never returned. $7,800 stolen from my account without authorization. I helped with groceries, lights, heating for 7 years. I didn't have all the receipts kept, but I had some. I did a conservative estimate, about $12,000 total. I watched Maddie for 2 years, Monday through Friday, 7 in the morning to 7 at night. I didn't receive a dime. I looked up on my phone how much a nanny charges. Back then, it was at least $1,500 a month for part-time, way more for full-time. I stuck to the low end. Times 24 months, $36,000. Plus the hemming of the wedding dress I did for free. I charged $200 for a job that intricate. Plus the other sewing jobs I did over the years, curtains, repairs, suit fittings, at least $1,500 in labor. I added it all up, $72,500. I looked at that number and felt something wake up inside me. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't overly sensitive, I wasn't making things up. They had used me. They had taken my money, my labor, my life. And when they didn't need me anymore, they threw me away. I organized all the papers in an old folder I had in the suitcase. I put them in order. Transfer receipt in front. Bank statement right behind. Notebook entries separated by month. List of services rendered with the dates I remembered. It wasn't perfect, but it was all there. I put the folder at the bottom of the suitcase and lay down. I couldn't sleep well. I stared at the ceiling, thinking. Richard wasn't going to return the money willingly. Vanessa was going to do everything to keep me away. And if I showed up alone, with nothing, they were going to treat me like a crazy person, like a senile old woman inventing stories. I needed help. Someone who understood the law, who knew how to collect this properly. Early in the morning on Christmas Day, I got up, washed my face, and called a number I had kept for years. Mr. Harrison, an employment and civil attorney. He had been a friend of Marcus. He had been at our wedding. After Marcus died, he showed up at the funeral, hugged me, and said, "If you need anything, Martha, call me." I never called, until that day. The phone rang 3 times. He answered. Hello? Mr. Harrison, this is Martha, Marcus's wife. I don't know if you remember me. He was silent for a second. Then he said with a softer voice, Of course I remember, Martha. How are you? I took a deep breath. No, Mr. Harrison. I'm not doing well at all, and I need help. Mr. Harrison met me at 3 in the afternoon at his office. I arranged all the papers in the folder, dressed in the simplest, most dignified clothes I had, and went. The office was small, in an old building near the courthouse. There was a desk full of case files, a bookshelf full of law books, and a worn leather chair in front. He met me at the door. Gray hair, glasses, the same calm expression as always. Martha, come in. Sit here. I sat down. I put the folder on my lap. He pulled up a chair and sat in front of me, without the desk in between, like someone talking to a friend, not a client. Tell me what happened. I told him everything. From the beginning. The widowhood, the sacrifices, the money saved for business school, Vanessa's arrival, the humiliations, the loaned money, the thefts from my account, the eviction on Christmas Eve. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, hand on his chin, nodding occasionally. When I finished, I opened the folder and showed him the papers, the transfer receipt, the statement, the notebook with the logs, the list of services performed. He took each paper, read it calmly, went back, read it again. After about 10 minutes, he took off his glasses and looked at me. Martha, you kept everything perfectly. This is evidence, and solid evidence. I felt a relief so great I almost collapsed right there. He continued, but I need to tell you something. This isn't just a debt collection. There is criminal activity here. I froze. Criminal? The withdrawals made from your account without authorization. That's theft, specifically identity theft and fraud. He used your PIN, which you gave him for another purpose, and took money without your knowledge. Technically, that's embezzlement at the very least. Depending on the state statutes, this is grand larceny. I was stunned. He saw my face and spoke more slowly. I know he's your son. I know it's hard, but the law is clear. If you want to collect, we can collect. And if you want to press charges, you have that right. I breathed deeply. Mr. Harrison, I don't want to destroy my son. I just want what is mine. I want him to acknowledge what he did, and I want dignity. He nodded. Then we'll do this. I'm going to set up a 3-step plan. He took a notepad and started writing. First, the legal part. I'm going to draft a demand letter. It's a formal document sent via certified mail where we list everything he owes you and give him a deadline to pay. 15 days. If he doesn't pay, we file a civil lawsuit. And if necessary, we file a police report for the unauthorized withdrawals. I swallowed hard. And does this go to court? Only if he doesn't pay. But the demand letter usually scares them enough. He'll understand you're serious and that you have proof. He continued. Second, the social part. You said there were witnesses to the humiliation. Vanessa's sister-in-law, the cousin. If necessary, we subpoena them. There are also the social media posts, the family photos where you don't appear. I'm going to ask you to gather all that. Screenshots, dates, everything. I nodded. I can do that. And third, the emotional part. He stopped and looked straight into my eyes. Martha, you need to be prepared for his reaction. He might deny it. He might get angry. He might say you're making it up. Vanessa will try to turn him against you permanently. I spoke firmly. I already lost my son, Mr. Harrison. I lost him the moment he kicked me out. Now I just want justice. He smiled slightly. Then let's get justice. Mr. Harrison picked up the papers again and started organizing them. While he worked, he spoke without looking at me. Martha, there's one more thing. I'm going to need to pull his financial history to see if he was really in trouble when he asked you for the money. Because if he lied to you about his solvency, that changes everything. I hadn't thought of that. He continued. If he bought a car, did renovations, traveled, or spent on luxuries while claiming to be broke, that's bad faith. And we use that in the lawsuit. I remembered the expensive dinner, Vanessa's new dress, the comment about trading in the truck. Mr. Harrison, he went out for dinner at a luxury restaurant 2 weeks after asking me for the money, and she bought designer clothes. He wrote it down. Excellent. Try to remember more details, dates, places. We spent another hour building the document. He asked questions. I answered. He wrote, organized, calculated. At the end, he gathered everything and said, "I'm going to draft the letter tonight. Tomorrow morning we notarize it. Then I'll have a process server or courier deliver it personally to his house. He'll receive it in hand. He'll have to sign for it. And from there, the clock starts ticking. And if he doesn't pay, then we sue, and I guarantee you, Martha, with this evidence, we win." I stood up. He did too. He gave me a tight hug, the kind from someone who knows your history. "Marcus would be proud of you." I held back tears. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison." I left the office and went back to the boarding house. That night, lying in the borrowed bed, I took my phone and did what Mr. Harrison had asked. I went on Richard and Vanessa's social media. I took screenshots of all the family photos where I wasn't present, the photos of Maddie's birthday, the photos of last Christmas, the trips they took. I saved everything in a folder on my phone. Then I wrote on a paper the dates I remembered, the expensive dinner, the new clothes, the comment about the new car. I put everything together with the other documents. Tomorrow, the notification would be registered. And the day after tomorrow, Richard would receive it. The day after the Christmas, he kicked me out. The unforgettable surprise he wasn't expecting. On the morning of the 26th, I woke up early. I hadn't slept much, but it wasn't exhaustion. It was a different energy. It felt like something inside me had reorganized itself during the night. I took a shower, put on jeans and a simple white blouse. Nothing flashy. Nothing that looked like I was trying to impress. I tied my hair back, put on some light lipstick. I looked in the mirror. It wasn't the same woman who walked out of that house 2 days ago with a suitcase in her hand. I took the folder with all the documents, put it in my purse, and went downstairs. Mr. Harrison had sent a message early. "Letter ready. Meet me at the notary at 9 a.m. I arrived before him. I waited on the sidewalk. When he arrived, he had a briefcase under his arm and that serious face of someone going to work. We went in together. He handed the papers to the clerk, paid the fees, waited for the stamp. The notary read the document, stamped every page, registered it in the system, and handed it back with the receipt. He turned to me. "Done. Now it's official. I'm sending the courier this afternoon." I took a deep breath. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison." He put his hand on my shoulder. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked him in the eyes. "Absolutely." He smiled slightly. "Then stay strong. Anything happens, call me." I went back to the boarding house, but I couldn't sit still. I paced around the room. I sat down, stood up, looked out the window. I grabbed the notebook again and reread everything. Every humiliation, every disrespect, every lie. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something colder, more solid. Around 3 in the afternoon, Mr. Harrison texted, "Courier just left for delivery. Should be there in 20 minutes." My heart raced. 20 minutes. I imagined the scene. The courier knocking on the door. Richard opening it, still hungover from Christmas, thinking it was Amazon. The legal envelope in his hand. The signature on the receipt. His face when he opened it and read. I waited. 15 minutes later, the phone rang. It was Mr. Harrison. "Martha, he received it. He signed. The demand letter is in his hands." I hung up and sat on the bed. Now he knew. He knew I had all the proof. He knew I had counted every penny he owed me. He knew I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. And he knew he had 15 days to pay. Or he was going to answer to the law. I waited the rest of the afternoon. I thought he was going to call, that he was going to send angry texts, that he was going to show up at the boarding house. Nothing. Absolute silence. The next morning, still nothing. Mr. Harrison called. "Martha, this is normal. He's processing it. He's probably talking to Vanessa, maybe even a lawyer. Let him stew. The clock is ticking." But late in the afternoon of the second day, my cell phone rang. It was Richard. My heart beat hard. I answered. "Hello?" His voice sounded tense, controlled. "Mom, we need to talk." I didn't tremble. I didn't stutter. I spoke firmly. "Go ahead. No, in person. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, here at the house." I thought fast. "No. In a neutral place. At the park, across from the church." He hesitated. "Fine. 3 o'clock. He hung up. I called Mr. Harrison immediately. I told him. He said, "Don't go alone. I'm coming with you. And keep your phone recording in your pocket. Everything he says can be used." On the morning of the meeting, I woke up with my stomach in knots. I put on the same simple clothes, tied my hair back. I grabbed my purse with the document folder inside. Mr. Harrison picked me up at the boarding house. We drove together, not talking much. He parked about 50 yards from the park. "I'll stay right here. Anything happens, you wave. Do you have your phone?" I showed him. "Yes. Record everything." I got out of the car. I walked slowly toward the park. The sun was bright but cold. There were some kids playing on the swings, an old man sitting on a bench reading a newspaper, and there, under the big oak tree in the center, was Richard, arms crossed, face grim, watching me arrive. I took a deep breath, and I went. I got close to him and stopped 6 feet away. He didn't say hello. He just looked at me with that tired, irritated face. "Mom, what is this story about a demand letter? A lawsuit?" I didn't answer right away. I just opened my purse, took out the folder, and held it in my hand. "It's the story of the money you owe me." He scoffed. "What money? I asked you for a family loan. That's not a business debt. You asked for $15,000 as a loan. You promised to pay it back in 3 months. It's been 6. Until today, nothing." He looked away. "I was tight on cash. You know how business is." "I know. So tight you went to a luxury steakhouse 2 weeks later. So tight Vanessa bought designer clothes. So tight you talked about trading in your truck." His voice rose. "I have a right to live my life. Yes, but not with my money." I opened the folder and pulled out the transfer receipt. I showed it to him. $15,000. Wired from my account to yours on July 23rd. You signed below that you would pay it back. You didn't. He looked at the paper but didn't take it. "Mom, I'll pay you, but you didn't need to make this scandal. Hiring a lawyer, sending certified letters. This is embarrassing." I felt something boil inside me. Embarrassing? You kicked me out of the house on Christmas Eve in front of everyone, and I am the embarrassing one? He clenched his teeth. You were causing problems. Vanessa couldn't take it anymore. You were there judging everything, meddling where you weren't wanted. I took care of your son for 2 years. For free. I woke up at dawn, changed diapers, gave baths, fed him. While you two worked, lived your lives, went out. Who stayed with Maddie? Me. Nobody forced you. That cut deep. But I didn't retreat. I pulled out the second sheet from the folder, the list I had made. 2 years, 5 days a week, 12 hours a day. A nanny charges $1,500 a month minimum. You owe me $36,000 just in labor. He laughed. A dry, nervous laugh. Are you crazy? You're the grandmother. Grandmothers don't charge to watch their grandkids. Grandmothers also aren't called the nanny in front of guests. Grandmothers aren't left out of the family photo. Grandmothers aren't treated like maids. He went quiet. I continued. I helped with groceries, lights, heat, medicine for 7 years. I have receipts for some months. I didn't keep everything, but I kept enough to prove it. $12,000. I pulled out the third sheet, the bank statement. And there's more. You took money from my account without me knowing. $7,800 in 5 different withdrawals. His face changed color. It went pale. I didn't take anything. You did. You took my card, wrote down the PIN, and siphoned it off little by little, thinking the old lady wouldn't notice. He shook his head. Mom, I didn't do that. I showed him the statement. I pointed to the withdrawals, one by one. Here, August 3rd, 1,000. August 15th, 1,000. August 22nd, 800. September 7th, 1,500. September 20th, 1,500. I didn't make those withdrawals. You did. He looked at the paper, then at me. It could have been a bank error. It wasn't. I went there. They confirmed it. It was with my physical card, with my PIN. The PIN only you knew, because I gave you the card once and you wrote it down. He wiped his hand over his face. He stood in silence. I gathered everything. $72,500. That is what you owe me. And you have 15 days to pay, or I sue. He exploded. You won't do that. I'm your son. And I am your mother. But you treated me like trash. I took you into my home. Into the home you bought with the money from the store you opened, with the money from the land that I sold. Silence. I continued, my voice steady. I sold the only land I had, so you could go to college. That land was my dream, Richard. It was your father's dream. We were going to build a cabin there, but I sold it because I thought you were worth more." He looked down. "I sewed until my hands swelled up to pay for your school. I woke up at dawn to get ahead on work. I gave up everything, and when you grew up, when you became successful, I didn't ask for anything. I just asked for a place to live, a corner, not to be a queen, just to be close to you." His voice came out low. "Mom, Vanessa humiliated me, and you let her. She treated me like a servant, and you let her. She cut me out of photos, pushed me to the side, erased me from your life, and you let her." He stood frozen. I continued. "And in the end, when she told you to choose between her and me, you chose, and you kicked me out." He tried to speak. "I was under pressure. Everyone is under pressure, Richard. I was too, but I never abandoned you." A woman walked by the park with a child. She looked at us, but kept walking. He took a deep breath and tried to change his tone. He became calmer, more controlled. "Okay, Mom. I acknowledge that I messed up. I shouldn't have kicked you out like that. But this amount is exaggerated. $70,000? I don't have that cash right now. You do. You have the store, you have the truck, you have the house. I'm not selling any of that. Then pay in installments. The lawyer accepts a payment plan. But you have to start paying." He shook his head. "I'm not paying all that. It's abusive." I looked at him. "Abusive is what you did to me." He crossed his arms. "You won't sue. You don't have the guts." I took out the last sheet, the notarized demand letter. "I already started the process. This is the demand letter. You received it. You signed for it. The clock is already ticking. If you don't pay, we file the civil lawsuit, and if necessary, the criminal charges for the withdrawals." His face turned red. "Criminal? Grand larceny. You took money from my account without authorization. That's a felony." He took a step back. "You wouldn't do that. I'm your own flesh and blood." I took a step forward. "You stopped being my son when you put me on the street on Christmas Eve." He was speechless. I put the papers back in the folder. "You have 15 days. After that, it's up to the judge." I turned to leave. He yelled, "Vanessa is going to hear about this. She isn't going to like it." I stopped. I turned slowly. I looked him in the eyes. "Richard, I spent the last few years of my life trying not to bother Vanessa. I stayed quiet. I swallowed humiliations. I pretended I didn't see. But now, I don't care what she likes or doesn't like. Now, I'm worrying about me." He stood there. I continued, "And if you had an ounce of manhood, of character, you wouldn't be asking what Vanessa thinks. You would be begging me for forgiveness." Silence. I turned again and started walking. He yelled from a distance, "You're going to regret this." I didn't turn back. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. Mr. Harrison was leaning against the car, waiting. When he saw me, he opened the door. I got in. I closed the door. I breathed deep. He asked quietly, "Did you record everything?" I showed him the phone. "Everything." He smiled. "Then now we just wait." We drove away, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had done the right thing. The 15 days passed. Richard didn't pay. On the 16th day, Mr. Harrison filed the civil lawsuit and the police report for the fraudulent withdrawals. 2 days later, Richard called. His voice sounded different. No anger, no arrogance. Just tired. "Mom, I didn't know you would take this to the end," I answered firmly. "I warned you." He breathed hard on the other end. "Vanessa is furious. She says I need to resolve this fast, that it's staining our reputation." Staining the reputation. Not his heart, not his conscience. The reputation. "Richard, you have 2 options. Either you pay or the justice system decides for you." He was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "I'll pay, but in installments. I don't have it all at once." Mr. Harrison had coached me on this. "It can be installments, but there has to be a down payment of at least $15,000, and the rest in 12 months, with interest, all notarized." He accepted. He had no choice. 3 days later, we signed the agreement at the notary's office. He came alone. Vanessa didn't show up. He signed without looking at me. He handed over the cashier's check for the first payment. He took his copy of the document and left. He didn't even say goodbye. Mr. Harrison looked at me and said, He'll pay, because now it's legally binding. If he misses a payment, we garnish his wages immediately. And next time, no settlement. The payments started hitting my account, like clockwork, every 10th of the month. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life. I rented a small apartment, a one-bedroom, in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I bought furniture little by little. A bed, a small table, 2 chairs, a simple sofa. I put Marcus's wooden box on the shelf in the living room, the wedding photo right next to it. I went back to sewing. Not out of necessity, but because I liked it. I did custom orders on my own time, without pressure. An old client called me and asked me to make a prom dress for her daughter. I did it. It turned out beautiful. She paid well and recommended me to others. I started having a routine again. I woke up, had coffee, sewed a little, went for a walk in the park. I met a lady who lived in the building, Mrs. Davis. We started having coffee together every now and then. She told me about her life, I told her about mine. She didn't judge me. She just listened. And she said, "You did the right thing." 1 month after the agreement, my cell phone rang. It was Richard. I answered, but coldly. "Hello? Mom, I wanted to talk. In person." I thought about it. "Say it right here." He sighed. I messed up. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I shouldn't have let Vanessa humiliate you. And I shouldn't have taken your money. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence hang there. He continued, "I wanted to know if you would agree to come over to the house so we can talk properly. Maddie is asking for you." That squeezed my heart. Maddie. But I took a deep breath and spoke firmly. "Richard, I forgive you. But that doesn't mean things are going back to how they were. I know. You owe me respect. And if Vanessa can't respect me, I won't set foot in a place where I am humiliated." He went quiet. I continued, "If you want me to see Maddie, I'll come. But on a set day and time. I don't live there anymore. I'm not the nanny. I'm the grandmother. And I want to be treated like a grandmother." "Okay, Mom. And another thing. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine when it's not anymore. If someone disrespects me, I'm going to say it. And if I need to, I'll leave. I don't need anyone to survive anymore." He swallowed hard. "I understand. Then pick a day, and I'll come." I hung up. A week later, I went to his house. I knocked on the door. He opened it. Vanessa was in the living room, sitting on the sofa. She greeted me with a nod. Dry. But she greeted me. Maddie came running. "Grandma!" I picked him up, hugged him tight. That smell of a child. That smile. I stayed for 2 hours. I played with Maddie, talked with Richard. Vanessa stayed quiet, in her corner. When I left, Richard walked me to the gate. "Thanks for coming, Mom." I looked at him. "Richard, I love you. You're my son. But I love myself too. And I'm not going to sacrifice my dignity for anyone ever again." He nodded. "I get it." I went back to my apartment, alone, but in peace. The payments continued coming, all on time. At the end of a year, the debt was paid off. Mr. Harrison called me. "Martha, it's over. You received everything." I thanked him. I paid his fees, and I saved the rest. Today, 2 years later, I have my life. I live alone. I sew when I want. I see Maddie once a week. Richard respects me. Vanessa tolerates me. And that's fine. I learned one thing in this whole story. Dignity is not negotiable. It doesn't matter who the person is. It doesn't matter how much you love them. If someone disrespects you, humiliates you, uses you, you have the right to stand up and collect what's yours. I spent years thinking that a mother's love meant accepting everything, swallowing everything, staying quiet. But it's not. True love is also knowing how to protect yourself. It's knowing how to say no. It's knowing how to demand what is yours. And if you are going through this right now, if someone in your family is treating you like a burden, like a problem, like something disposable, I tell you, you are not. You have value, you have rights, and you deserve respect. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter how many years you dedicated. You are not obligated to accept humiliation. And if necessary, seek help, find a lawyer, gather the proof, and collect. Because justice isn't revenge. Justice is dignity. If this story touched you, comment below which city you are watching from. And stay with me for the next videos that will appear on your screen. Someone might need to hear this today.